The Great Spirit made both the white man and the red man. I think he made the red man first. He made me in this land, and it belongs to me. Red Cloud, 1865. With these words, one man united warring tribes to do what seemed impossible: defeat the U.S. Army in every battle for 2 years straight. No Native American leader ever claimed such a perfect victory record against American military might. The path to this alliance began months earlier, with blood spilled on the snowy ground of Sand Creek. On January 15, 1865, Major Edward Wynkoop rode through the gates of Fort Lyon, Colorado Territory. Snow covered the ground where, just 6 weeks earlier, Colonel John Chivington had departed with 700 men before attacking peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho camps at Sand Creek. Wynkoop, who believed he had established peace with these tribes before being reassigned to Kansas, returned to interview survivors. I learned from various eyewitnesses the full particulars of that massacre, Wynkoop wrote in his official report. He recorded testimonies from soldiers who refused to participate and civilians who witnessed the slaughter. His final assessment labeled Chivington an inhuman monster who had deliberately attacked peaceful Indians who believed themselves under military protection. By spring, the U.S. government had compiled 800 pages of testimony documenting what military investigators termed the Chivington Massacre. Despite the evidence, Chivington escaped formal punishment. He resigned his commission on February 26, 1865, before a military court could convene, and civilian prosecutors filed no criminal charges against him. The massacre's stain followed him until his death in 1894, but legal consequences never materialized. The repercussions extended beyond Chivington. On October 17, 1865, Colorado Territorial Governor John Evans was removed from office for his role in creating conditions that led to the massacre. The United States government signed Treaty of the Little Arkansas with Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho representatives on October 14, 1865, promising $39 per capita in compensation to Sand Creek survivors. The U.S. Treasury never dispersed these funds. The treaty permanently removed Cheyenne and Arapaho claims to Colorado lands. While government officials conducted investigations and drafted documents, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho implemented their own response. During January, February, and March of 1865, they swept across 100 miles of frontier territory. Warriors destroyed ranches, settlements, and stage stations along the South Platte River. They attacked Julesburg on January 7th, killing 14 soldiers and civilians, then returned on February 2nd with nearly 1,000 warriors to burn every structure to the ground. They took everything of value first, reported telegraph operator Jack Slade, who observed the attack from a distance. Then burned every building. The message was clear. The U.S. Army mobilized reinforcements at Forts Laramie, Halleck, and Kearney. Colonel Thomas Moonlight assembled a force of 500 cavalrymen to pursue the raiders, but found only abandoned camps and cold trails. Meanwhile, approximately 4,000 tribal members traveled north toward Red Cloud's territory in the Powder River Basin. They transported 900 teepee lodges, tons of supplies, and herds of horses and cattle, estimated at several thousand head. They navigated this journey through Wyoming territory during midwinter, when temperatures frequently dropped below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. U.S. Army scouts failed to locate this massive migration. A Lakota warrior named Black Elk later recounted, "We moved at night when possible. Our scouts watched the soldiers' movements. We crossed their tracks sometimes just hours after they passed." On February 24, 1865, Major General Grenville Dodge, commander of the Department of Missouri, received intelligence that refugees from Colorado were moving north toward Wyoming. He dispatched orders to Brigadier General Patrick Connor to find and kill them all. Connor had established his reputation as an Indian fighter after his January 29, 1863 attack on a Shoshone village at Bear River in Utah Territory, where his troops killed 493 men, women, and children. Powder River presented a far greater challenge than the isolated Shoshone band. As tribal groups moved northward, they left a trail of destruction across 400 miles of territory. Ranches burned, stagecoaches were ambushed, and telegraph lines were cut. War parties carried out hit-and-run attacks, killing 165 settlers and soldiers between January and March 1865. They left mutilated bodies as warnings, often taking scalps and sometimes dismembering corpses according to tribal war customs. Despite deploying multiple cavalry units totaling over 1,000 men, Generals Dodge and Connor never intercepted the migrants. By March 1865, when the tribes reached Red Cloud's camps along the Powder River, their warriors had killed more people than had died at Sand Creek. The arrival of southern tribes created initial tension. The northern Oglala and Oglala Lakota had maintained limited contact with their southern relatives and the Cheyenne for many years. Different dialects, customs, and band rivalries created awkwardness during the first days of reunion. This tension dissolved quickly when Southern Cheyenne leaders, Black Kettle and White Antelope's brother, recounted the Sand Creek massacre in detail at the council fire. White Antelope had been killed while standing with arms raised, singing his death song. Women and children had been shot while begging for mercy. Babies had been killed and scalped. Bodies had been mutilated with women's genitals cut out and displayed as trophies in Denver theaters. As the stories unfolded, Northern warriors gripped their weapons. Old feuds between bands vanished, replaced by unified anger toward white encroachment. Lakota chief Pawnee Killer stood and pledged his warriors to the coming fight. Northern Cheyenne chief Dull Knife followed, offering his band's support. One by one, leaders from each group committed to a united front. Red Cloud spoke first at the Grand War Council on the Tongue River on April 12, 1865. 8 years earlier, he had advocated for war against white settlers, but was outvoted by older, more cautious chiefs. Now 43 years old and in his prime as a war leader, he commanded respect across tribal divisions. The Great Spirit made both the white man and the red man, Red Cloud told the assembled tribal leaders. I think he made the red man first. He made me in this land, and it belongs to me. He made the white man beyond the great sea, and his land is there. Since he crossed the sea, I have given him room. Now the white man surrounds me, I have only a small spot of land left. The Great Spirit tells me to keep it. This simple statement cemented the alliance. That night, warriors danced around massive fires while scouts reported on Army movements from Fort Laramie. Red Cloud outlined his strategy. They would hunt buffalo in early summer to build food stores, then launch a coordinated attack on Bridge Station, a small Army outpost 28 miles northwest of Fort Laramie. While the main force engaged there, smaller war parties would strike simultaneously to the southeast and west, keeping Army reinforcements occupied and divided. This plan represented the first large-scale strategic operation from Plains tribes using simultaneous attacks against multiple targets. U.S. military commanders schooled at West Point in conventional European warfare considered Native Americans incapable of such sophisticated coordination. Their cultural blindness would cost them dearly in the months ahead. By late April 1865, as the Civil War concluded in the East, a new conflict took shape on the northern plains. Red Cloud's War had begun, though no one yet called it by that name. While Red Cloud finalized his strategy for the coming campaign, his warriors did not wait idle. Beginning in late April 1865, small-scale attacks erupted across eastern Wyoming Territory and continued through July. The Cheyenne Dog Soldiers' elite warriors who had taken a sacred vow never to retreat in battle struck first. On May 2, 1865, a party of 30 Dog Soldiers ambushed a stage relay station 40 miles west of Fort Laramie. They killed all 5 guards, mutilated the bodies, and set fire to the buildings. They left a warning sign, a split willow stick with 5 notches, planted in the center of the ruined station. Within a week, combined, Lakota and Cheyenne raiding parties hit 4 more stage stations. They attacked wagon trains on the Oregon Trail and ambushed 3 Army patrols. By mid-May, travel west of Fort Laramie virtually halted. Telegraph communications between military outposts faltered as warriors cut the lines and uprooted the poles. The savages appear everywhere at once, wrote Lieutenant Benjamin Marshall in his dispatch to Fort Laramie On May 12th, they strike, vanish, and reappear 50 miles distant the next day. Colonel Thomas Moonlight, temporary commander at Fort Laramie, gathered 180 cavalry troopers from Companies C and D of the 11th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry on May 17th. He led them north following reports of a large war party. For 13 days, Moonlight's force rode in widening circles through the Powder River country. They covered 450 miles of territory, but encountered no warriors. They found only cold campfires and tracks leading in contradictory directions. At Department of Missouri headquarters in Omaha on June 1, 1865, Major General Grenville Dodge pounded his desk upon reading Moonlight's report of failure. "If we can't find the hostiles, we'll eliminate the friendlies," Dodge told his staff. He drafted orders for General Patrick Connor at Fort Laramie. Kill the 2,000 Indians camped near the fort. These Native Americans, derisively called Laramie loafers by soldiers, maintained peaceful relations with the Army. They were primarily Oglala and Oglala Lakota, who relied on the fort's rations and occasional trade with travelers. Connor received Dodge's orders on June 3rd and immediately dispatched a messenger with his reply, "Executing 2,000 peaceful Indians within sight of the fort would be unwise. These people have not participated in attacks. Such a massacre would unite every tribe against us." After 3 days of exchanged telegrams, Dodge relented. He modified his order. The Laramie loafers would be forcibly relocated to Fort Kearny in Nebraska Territory, ostensibly to be taught farming. On June 8, 1865, an Army patrol from Fort Laramie rounded up approximately 1,800 Lakota camped near the fort. Captain William O'Brien, commanding Company F of the 7th Iowa Cavalry, informed the Lakota chiefs they must move immediately. The soldiers confiscated their weapons and provided just 8 wagons for the elderly and sick. Everyone else would walk the 220 miles to Fort Kearny. The Lakota complied outwardly but seethed with resentment. They had maintained peace with the Americans and now faced banishment from their homeland to Pawnee Territory, their traditional enemies. By the 3rd night on the trail, they began plotting escape. On the 5th night, June 13th, the Lakota lookouts noticed a lone figure approaching their camp after sunset. The man moved with remarkable stealth, slipping past Army sentries undetected. When he entered the firelight, the Lakota recognized Crazy Horse, the 25-year-old war leader known for his battlefield courage and uncanny ability to appear without warning. "Strongheart's warriors wait behind those hills," Crazy Horse told the camp leaders, pointing north. The Strongheart Society represented one of the most respected warrior groups among the Lakota. "We will help you escape. Red Cloud sent me. We have already made plans," replied an elder. "Tomorrow we strike." At dawn on June 14th, several young Lakota men created a distraction. They stole 3 Army horses and fled north, drawing pursuit from 15 soldiers. As the soldiers gave chase, 40 Strongheart's warriors emerged from a dry creek bed and attacked the soldiers from behind. Simultaneously, the Laramie loafers grabbed whatever possessions they could carry and fled north en masse. The outnumbered soldiers fought desperately. 5 died immediately, 7 suffered wounds. The remaining 3 retreated to the main patrol, which now faced 1,800 fleeing Lakota and dozens of hostile warriors. Captain O'Brien ordered his men to hold position rather than pursue. The Laramie loafers escaped northward toward Red Cloud's camps, while Strongheart's warriors screened their retreat. In a remarkable historical coincidence, this escape occurred at the exact location where the Horse Creek Treaty had been signed 14 years earlier in 1851. That treaty had promised lasting peace between whites and Plains tribes. Instead, it marked only a brief interlude in an escalating conflict. The morning after the escape, June 15th, Colonel Moonlight led 235 cavalrymen eastward from Fort Laramie in pursuit of the fleeing Lakota. He drove his men hard across the parched grasslands. By the time they reached the Nebraska-South Dakota border 3 days later, 1/3 of his command had fallen back, not from enemy action, but from horses collapsing in the waterless plains. This was precisely what the Lakota and Stronghearts had calculated. Moonlight pushed his remaining men forward until they reached a small spring on June 19th. As the exhausted troopers dismounted to water their horses, Strongheart's warriors struck from 3 directions. They fired rifles and arrows from high ground while whooping and waving blankets. The spooked cavalry horses bolted. The warriors captured every mount, leaving Moonlight and his men stranded 120 miles from Fort Laramie. For 8 grueling days, the cavalrymen walked back to the fort in summer heat, carrying their saddles, weapons, and wounded comrades. They arrived on June 27th, sunburned, footsore, and humiliated. "We were outwitted at every turn," admitted Sergeant William Haywood in his journal. "They knew the land. They knew where water existed and where it didn't. They knew exactly how far our horses could travel before breaking down." Moonlight blamed equipment failures and poor intelligence for the disaster. He vowed to prepare better for the next encounter. There would be no next encounter for him. General Connor removed him from command on July 4th, citing incompetence. General Dodge discharged him from the Army entirely on July 10th. Thomas Moonlight's military career ended in disgrace, but history would ultimately judge him more kindly than his superiors. His embarrassing adventure would pale compared to what Connor himself was about to experience in the heart of Red Cloud's territory. General Connor's reputation as an Indian fighter faced its greatest test with Red Cloud's first major offensive on the High Plains. While small war parties had terrorized the countryside since April, Red Cloud prepared for something more ambitious by mid-July 1865. The focal point of his strategy was a strategic outpost northwest of Fort Laramie. In 1859, a French trader named Louis Guinard had built a small trading post at an ancient crossing of the North Platte River 28 miles from Fort Laramie. Guinard constructed a toll bridge across the river, charging emigrants $1 per wagon and 50 cents per horse to cross. The U.S. Army recognized the location's value after the Pony Express established a station there in 1860. By 1861, the Army had expanded Guinard's original mud brick buildings into a military telegraph station. They added a cavalry detachment to protect the crossing telegraph line and mail route. By the summer of 1865, Bridge Station housed 119 soldiers from Companies G and H of the 11th Kansas Cavalry. Among them was Lieutenant Casper Collins, a 20-year-old West Point dropout who had enlisted as a private before earning a battlefield commission. Despite the outpost's strategic position, Collins and his men had seen little combat. On July 22, 1865, Collins rode to Fort Laramie to requisition replacement horses for Bridge Station's mounted patrols. His timing proved unfortunate. General Connor arrived at the fort shortly after Collins and spotted the young lieutenant lingering in the parade ground. "Lieutenant," Connor shouted across the yard, "why aren't you at your post?" Collins explained his mission. The Irish-born general, known for his volatile temper, berated the young officer in front of senior staff. "Are you a coward, sir?" Connor demanded. "The enemy prowls within miles of your station while you dawdle here." "No, sir," Collins replied stiffly. "Return to your post immediately." Connor ordered. Collins rode back to Bridge Station on July 24th, arriving just as scouts reported increased Indian activity in the hills. The next afternoon, July 25th, Red Cloud's forces concealed themselves behind ridges east of the station. His combined force included Cheyenne warriors and fighters from most Lakota bands, totaling approximately 1,000 men. Red Cloud employed an ancient tactic. First, he sent decoy riders in full war regalia to parade along the ridgetops within view of the fort. 20 warriors rode back and forth, firing rifles into the air and shouting challenges to the soldiers. At first, the strategy seemed effective. The fort gates swung open in mid-afternoon. A detachment of artillery wheeled out a 12-pound mountain howitzer. The soldiers advanced to the bridge spanning the North Platte, but stopped there. The artillery crew aimed the cannon and fired 3 shells toward the taunting warriors. The shells exploded harmlessly on the hillsides as the warriors easily evaded the predictable artillery fire. For 2 hours, this standoff continued. The decoys rode closer, hoping to lure the soldiers away from their defensive position. The soldiers held firm at the bridge, firing occasional shells but refusing to pursue. As the sun dipped toward the western horizon, nearing dusk, it became clear the soldiers wouldn't take the bait. Red Cloud signaled the decoys to withdraw. The warriors disappeared over the ridgeline, leaving the soldiers watching empty hillsides. Captain James Greer, commanding officer at Bridge Station, wrote in his report, "The men showed uncommon discipline by holding position despite severe provocation. Previous lessons regarding pursuit of apparent stragglers have been well learned." Red Cloud returned to his camp that night to revise his strategy. The soldiers had not fallen for the simple decoy tactic. Tomorrow would require a more sophisticated approach. During the night of July 25th, Red Cloud revised his strategy. The decoy tactic had failed to draw soldiers into the open. He needed a more aggressive approach. At dawn on July 26, 1865, the soldiers at Bridge Station spotted warriors again, but this time much closer. Approximately 50 Lakota and Cheyenne fighters rode boldly within rifle range of the fort. They shouted insults in broken English, and Lakota challenging the soldiers to come out and fight. Inside the fort, Lieutenant Casper Collins assembled a small detachment of 28 cavalrymen from Company G, 11th Kansas. Several soldiers approached him with concerns. "Lieutenant, we need more men," urged Sergeant William Miller. "There are too many of them out there." Collins shook his head. 28 is sufficient for our purpose." Perhaps General Connor's implied accusation of cowardice still echoed in his mind, or perhaps he simply focused on his assigned task. Unknown to the warriors taunting the fort, Collins had no intention of engaging them directly. His orders were to provide escort for 5 supply wagons returning from Deer Creek Station to the west. Early the next morning, Collins signaled for the gate to open. He led his mounted cavalrymen out, while 11 infantry volunteers followed on foot as rear guard. Each cavalryman carried a 7-shot Spencer, repeating rifle 60 rounds of ammunition, and a Colt Army revolver with 20 rounds. Collins guided his men across the bridge, spanning the North Platte River, and into the valley beyond. The infantry stopped at the bridge's far end, maintaining a position where they could retreat to the fort if necessary. The cavalry advanced half a mile into the valley when Red Cloud sprung his trap. Over 300 Lakota warriors surged over the northern ridgeline. Simultaneously, nearly 200 Cheyenne fighters descended from the western hills. "Fire north and west," Collins shouted, drawing his saber. "Form a circle." The soldiers managed just one volley before the warriors closed in. The Spencers cracked in rapid succession, dropping several attackers, but the warriors' momentum didn't slow. A Lakota arrow struck Collins in the left side. He slumped forward, but remained mounted. Warriors surrounded the cavalry unit, striking with lances, arrows, war clubs, and tomahawks. The soldiers desperately tried to reload their Spencers, but the close quarters made long guns impractical. They drew their revolvers, firing point-blank into the mass of attackers. Within minutes, the battle transformed into a swirling chaos of dust and gun smoke. From the fort walls, soldiers strained to glimpse their comrades through the haze. In a momentary break in the dust cloud, several reported seeing Collins still mounted, but with an arrow protruding from his forehead directly between his eyes. Then the dust swallowed him. Private James Williams broke through the encirclement, his horse galloping toward the fort with Williams clinging to its neck, blood streaming from a lance wound in his thigh. 2 more riderless horses followed, then a 4th carrying a wounded corporal. The infantry at the bridge fired controlled volleys into the battle, trying to create an escape route for survivors. Captain James Greer ordered the fort's howitzer to fire over the warriors' heads, hoping to distract them. As the first survivors neared the bridge, 20 warriors from Red Cloud's own Bad Faces band emerged from concealment in the riverbank vegetation. They had positioned themselves to cut off retreat. They charged the fleeing cavalrymen, knocking 2 from their horses with war clubs. The infantry rear guard rushed forward, forming a skirmish line. They fired a coordinated volley at the Bad Faces, killing 3 and forcing the others to seek cover. A second battle erupted at the bridge as more cavalrymen attempted to escape the main fight. From his position on the hillside, Red Cloud surveyed the battlefield. He noticed movement to the west, a small wagon train appearing on the horizon. He signaled to Roman Nose, the Cheyenne war chief, to withdraw his dog soldiers from the main battle. Roman Nose led approximately 500 Cheyenne warriors toward the approaching wagons. 5 scouts rode ahead of the 5-wagon supply train. When they crested a small rise and spotted the charging warriors, they wheeled their horses and raced back to warn the wagons. The warriors closed rapidly. The scouts made for the Platte River, hoping to reach the fort by crossing downstream. 3 scouts made it across the fast-flowing water. 2 were caught in midstream by mounted warriors who rode into the river and struck them down with war clubs. The wagon drivers quickly recognized their predicament. They would never reach either the fort or the river. The wagon master, William Bailey, ordered his men to circle up in a shallow depression beside the road. The 5 wagons formed a small, roughly circular barricade. "Rifles ready. Take positions between wagons," Bailey shouted. The 12 men established firing positions and tried to secure their horses. The Cheyenne warriors captured all 16 horses within minutes, effectively stranding the Americans. Throughout the brutal midday heat, warriors kept the wagon party pinned down with rifle and arrow fire from the surrounding ridges. Occasional warriors charged the wagons but retreated under concentrated fire from the defenders' Spencer rifles. By noon, 3 Americans lay dead and 4 others nursed wounds. The July sun beat down mercilessly as ammunition dwindled. The warriors shifted tactics. They dismounted and began crawling through the tall grass toward the wagons from all directions. Using knives and tomahawks, they dug shallow trenches in the soft earth to conceal their approach. From the fort walls nearly 2 miles away, soldiers with field glasses observed the warriors digging shallow trenches and inching forward inch by inch toward the wagons. Captain Greer ordered artillery fire toward the wagon circle, hoping the explosions would alert the wagon party to the approaching danger. The besieged men misinterpreted the artillery fire, believing the fort was targeting warriors visible from its walls, but not from their position. They hunkered lower in their makeshift fortress. Later that afternoon, as if spring-loaded from the earth itself, dozens of warriors rose simultaneously from the grass less than 20 yards from the wagons. They rushed forward, throwing burning oil-soaked arrows into the canvas covers. Flames erupted across all 5 wagons. Soldiers watching from Bridge Station saw only a massive plume of black smoke rising from the site. When it cleared hours later, nothing remained but charred wagon frames and bodies. At nightfall, the final casualty count stood at 28 soldiers missing and presumed dead, with another 56 wounded. The telegraph line to Fort Laramie lay cut in 17 places. A mixed-blood Lakota scout named Jack Red Cloud, no relation to the chief, slipped out of Bridge Station under cover of darkness. He rode 28 miles to the nearest intact telegraph station to report the attack. Despite the devastating American losses, Red Cloud viewed the day with mixed emotions. His undisciplined force had allowed too many soldiers to escape. The fort itself remained intact and operational. Worse tensions emerged between the Lakota and Cheyenne contingents over battle tactics and the division of captured weapons. Red Cloud and Roman Nose met that night to smooth relations between their warriors. The alliance held but barely. Red Cloud hoped his fighters would learn from this engagement and fight more cohesively in future battles. The war had only just begun. If Red Cloud's forces knew one certainty following their attack on Bridge Station, it was that the blue-coated soldiers would return with overwhelming force. The Americans did not disappoint. News of Lieutenant Collins's death and the destruction of the wagon train reached Fort Laramie on July 27, 1865. General Patrick Connor immediately requested reinforcements and permission to launch a punitive expedition. Telegraph lines carried his urgent messages east to department headquarters. The orders to hunt Red Cloud originated from a complex chain of command that stretched back to Washington. Major General John Pope now directed the Department of the Missouri from his headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota. Pope had been essentially exiled to this post after his humiliating defeat at the Second Battle of Bull Run in August 1862, where Confederate generals Thomas Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet had outmaneuvered him at every turn. President Lincoln had subsequently reassigned him to the western frontier. By summer 1865, General Ulysses S. Grant had led Union forces to victory over the Confederacy. The War Department reorganized the nation into 5 military divisions as Reconstruction began. General William Tecumseh Sherman, architect of the devastating March to the Sea through Georgia, commanded the Division of the Mississippi, which encompassed most of the American West. Under Sherman's authority, Pope's Department of the Missouri included the Northern Plains. Where Red Cloud operated, Pope carried specific orders to secure the Bozeman Trail for travelers heading to Montana's gold fields. The trail must be opened and kept open, Pope wrote to his subordinates on August 1, 1865. The economic future of our nation depends on the gold flowing east. The Bozeman Trail represented a northern branch of the Oregon Trail cutting directly through Red Cloud's Powder River hunting grounds. John Bozeman had blazed the route in 1863 and successfully led one wagon train through in 1864, but Lakota and Cheyenne warriors had turned back 2 subsequent attempts. The trail shortened the journey to Montana's goldfields by 400 miles compared to the established route through Idaho Territory. This made it invaluable to both the U.S. government and gold seekers. Following the Civil War, gold served as the only truly reliable currency in the East. The federal government desperately needed additional gold to rebuild after 4 years of devastating warfare. Pope assigned the task of opening the trail to Major General Grenville Dodge, who in turn delegated the mission to General Connor at Fort Laramie. The first step: eliminate Red Cloud's forces, while Red Cloud had attacked but not destroyed Bridge Station in western Wyoming. Sitting Bull had simultaneously launched an assault on Fort Rice in present-day North Dakota, 350 miles to the northeast. The coordinated nature of these attacks surprised American commanders who had not anticipated such strategic coordination between tribal groups. Fort Rice's defenders had repelled Sitting Bull's attack. The fort occupied high ground with clear sightlines for miles in all directions. Soldiers spotted Sitting Bull's approaching force and bombarded them with artillery fire from 12-pound Napoleon guns. They refused to leave the fort's protection to engage Sitting Bull's warriors on open ground. After 3 hours of futile charges against the fort's walls, Sitting Bull withdrew his forces. Following these twin attacks, Generals Pope and Dodge developed an elaborate plan to crush both leaders. Connor would lead a force north from Fort Laramie to destroy Red Cloud. Simultaneously, General Alfred Sully would march north from Sioux City, Iowa, to eliminate Sitting Bull. The operation descended into chaos. From the beginning, General Sully marched his 1,200 men up and down the Missouri River for nearly a month without sighting Sitting Bull. His scouts found only abandoned camps and cold trails. By late August, the War Department redirected Sully's exhausted troops to Minnesota to suppress a reported Lakota uprising near Mankato. Upon arrival, Sully discovered the Lakota had fled across the border into Canada 3 weeks earlier. "We chase shadows while the Indians watch us from the hills," Sully wrote in his field journal on August 25th. "They dictate the tempo of this war, not us." Meanwhile, Connor developed a 3-pronged strategy to trap Red Cloud near his favorite hunting grounds along the Powder River. The plan looked impressive on headquarters maps in Omaha. "We will encircle the hostiles and crush them between our forces," Connor explained to his officers on August 2nd. He unrolled a large map across a table at Fort Laramie, pointing to the Powder River Basin. Connor ordered Colonel Nelson Cole to march a 1,400-man force out of Omaha, approaching from the east. Colonel Samuel Walker would lead 600 men directly north from Fort Laramie, approaching Red Cloud from the south. Connor himself would command a 1,000-man column departing Fort Laramie simultaneously with Walker's force, but then veering northwest to approach from the west. Cole and Walker would eventually link up and use their combined strength to push Red Cloud's massive force toward Connor's waiting troops. On paper, this strategy would trap the Lakota and Cheyenne between converging forces totaling 3,000 soldiers. Problems emerged almost immediately. Colonel Cole's column began suffering the same fate as Colonel Moonlight's earlier that summer. Crossing the barren plains of western South Dakota, his cavalry horses began dying from heat exhaustion and lack of water. By August 15th, Cole had lost 97 horses and was forcing his men to walk alongside those animals still able to carry equipment. "The men grow sullen as they march through this infernal country," Lieutenant James Gordon noted in his diary. "Their boots fall apart, their water runs low, but Colonel Cole drives us forward. The Indians we seek remain invisible." Despite these hardships, Cole pushed his column deeper into hostile territory, determined to complete his portion of Connor's grand strategy. The elaborate trap for Red Cloud had been set in motion, but the hunters were already struggling, while their prey watched and waited. General Connor had correctly predicted the location of Red Cloud's camps in the Powder River Basin. Yet his early August expedition veered off course when his Pawnee scouts discovered fresh tracks from a large group heading northwest. Connor ordered his column to follow. "These must be Red Cloud's people," Connor told his officers on August 13, 1865, examining the trampled grass. "We will pursue immediately." The tracks led to an encampment along the Tongue River, but it wasn't Red Cloud's people. The scouts had discovered Black Bear's northern Arapaho village of 250 people. At dawn on August 17th, Connor's troops surrounded the village and attacked without warning. Soldiers charged through the camp, firing into teepees where families still slept. The Arapaho fought back with whatever weapons they could grab, but they were overwhelmed by the cavalry's Spencer repeating rifles and howitzers. When the shooting stopped, 60 northern Arapaho lay dead, including Black Bear's son. Connor's men captured 500 horses and burned every tippy to the ground. All winter food stores were destroyed. Women and children who survived huddled together watching soldiers torch their possessions. The fatal error became clear during interrogation of prisoners. This northern Arapaho band had maintained peace with the United States. They had never participated in attacks on settlers or soldiers. This neutrality ended that morning. The survivors promptly joined Red Cloud's alliance against the whites once Connor's troops departed. While Connor's and Cole's cavalry columns slowly converged toward their intended target, Red Cloud relaxed in his camps, celebrating the partial victory at Bridge Station. His warriors conducted small raids but focused primarily on preparing for the fall buffalo hunt. In late August, scouts alerted Red Cloud that a 15-wagon train with military escort had entered his territory. Red Cloud gathered 500 warriors and surrounded the caravan. When the travelers raised a white flag, Red Cloud and another chief negotiated with the white travelers. "You may continue west," Red Cloud told the wagon master through an interpreter, "but you must travel north of my hunting grounds and you must pay tribute." The tribute price, one wagon filled with supplies, including sugar, coffee, and ammunition. The travelers agreed, paid the tax, and departed unmolested. This interaction highlighted a fundamental cultural difference. In Lakota culture, warfare wasn't a year-round, all-consuming enterprise. It followed seasonal patterns. Winter meant staying in camp awaiting spring. Spring brought early buffalo hunts. Summer was for warfare against enemies. Fall meant late buffalo hunts to prepare for winter, following the Bridge Station battle in late July. Red Cloud's forces returned to their camps, celebrated their attack, then prepared for the fall buffalo hunt. They considered their fighting done for the year. On August 28, 1865, Colonel Nelson Cole's exhausted column inadvertently made contact with Sitting Bull. Cole had successfully marched his 1,400 cavalrymen between the camps of Sitting Bull and Red Cloud without detecting either. But as his force approached the confluence of the Powder and Yellowstone rivers in eastern Montana, Sitting Bull found him. Cole's men were frustrated and bordering on mutiny. They hadn't received communications from General Connor for nearly a month. Cole sent scouts to locate Connor's forces. The scouts returned empty-handed and exhausted. Unknown to Cole, Connor was simultaneously searching for him, with equally poor results. On September 1st, as Cole's column followed the Powder River, Sitting Bull struck. 400 warriors attacked the column's flanks and pushed the soldiers into a cottonwood grove. For 4 days and nights, warriors kept the soldiers pinned down but couldn't approach closely. The soldiers' Spencers and howitzers created a deadly perimeter. Private John Reardon recorded the siege in his journal, "Indians circle us constantly, but keep their distance. Our rifles hold them back. We shoot any warrior who ventures within 300 yards." Cole couldn't remain in the grove indefinitely. The high plains weather forced his hand. On the first day of September, a northerly storm swept down from the Bighorn Mountains. Temperature plummeted, dropping from sweltering heat to near freezing in less than a day. Snow and sleet pelted the exposed soldiers. Men burned anything non-essential for warmth. 200 horses died from cold and starvation. After the storm passed, Cole ordered his men to move out. Sitting Bull's warriors harassed the column for 2 days, but mounted no major attacks. Sitting Bull sent messengers to Red Cloud's camps with news of the Bluecoats' position. After 2 days, Sitting Bull withdrew to remain near his own camps for protection. Red Cloud's warriors took over the pursuit. Though Red Cloud himself wasn't present, Crazy Horse helped lead the Lakota forces while Roman Nose commanded the Cheyenne. Cole's men formed their wagons into a defensive square at the base of a hillside on September 5th. Crazy Horse, famous for daring rides past enemy lines, attempted to draw soldiers out of formation. The tactic failed. Roman Nose, unwilling to be outdone by the younger Lakota leader, tried similar bravado. He rode the length of the Army's defensive lines 3 times, shouting curses and challenges in broken English. On the 3rd pass, soldiers shot his horse from under him. Roman Nose tumbled to the ground, but escaped on foot behind cover of other mounted warriors. The warriors then launched a full assault. Cole's men repelled them with concentrated rifle fire and canister shot from their mountain howitzers. The battle reached stalemate by nightfall. The Cheyenne quickly tired of the impasse and departed for the Black Hills to prepare for their fall buffalo hunt. Cole seized this opportunity to break camp and continue marching. His column proceeded cautiously, aware that remaining Lakota warriors shadowed their movements. 3 days later, on September 8th, Cole experienced his first and only stroke of luck. His Pawnee scouts accidentally discovered the eastern edge of Red Cloud's massive encampment along the Tongue River. They encountered 27 Cheyenne stragglers, some of the last departing for the Black Hills. The scouts and a cavalry detachment attacked the Cheyenne without warning, leaving no survivors. For the first time, Cole possessed the element of surprise. He prepared for a traditional frontal assault on Red Cloud's camps. Red Cloud was completely unprepared. Warning came only minutes before Cole's troops would have reached the camp perimeter. Red Cloud frantically organized his warriors for battle. Women and children hurriedly dismantled teepees to escape. Then Cole's luck vanished. A series of violent thunderstorms swept down from the Bighorn Mountains, drenching the plains with 36 hours of rain and hail. The downpour rendered rifles temporarily useless and turned the ground into mud that bogged down horses and wagons. The Lakota slipped away during the storms, but warrior detachments remained to monitor the soldiers. Cole's men lost 400 more horses to the freezing weather. They burned everything non-essential for warmth. Most men now traveled on foot and began the long march home. They grew weak, sore, and sick with scurvy from inadequate rations. For 2 days, Lakota warriors shadowed the column's flanks as it retreated. Unlike Sitting Bull's men or the Southern Cheyenne who possessed firearms, Red Cloud's warriors relied primarily on bows and arrows. These weapons proved ineffective at the distances the soldiers maintained. Had they possessed more rifles, they could have decimated Cole's force with ease. Even with this disadvantage, the Lakota sought opportunities to attack. None materialized. On September 13th, General Connor's scouts finally located Cole's column. The Lakota disappeared, returning to their camps for the fall buffalo hunt. Cole learned what had delayed Connor during the critical weeks of August. For reasons he never adequately explained, Connor had stopped to build a small outpost he named Camp Connor, later renamed Fort Reno, on the Powder River. More significantly, Connor had rushed to relieve a wagon train that Red Cloud himself had besieged for 13 days. The caravan consisted of surveyors attempting to expand the Bozeman Trail. Connor's cavalry drove off the attackers, but the overall effort to open the trail had failed completely. The combined forces limped back to Fort Laramie in October 1865. They had accomplished nothing and wasted an entire campaign season on the high plains. Soldiers arrived with frostbite, scurvy, and exhaustion. General Connor expressed complete disappointment with the results. His superior, General Dodge, attempted to put a positive spin in his official report, claiming the expedition demonstrated our ability to pursue hostiles into their previously safe territories. This paper victory changed nothing. Red Cloud remained undefeated. Sitting Bull remained undefeated. The Bozeman Trail remained closed. As autumn turned to early winter, the United States government reverted to its old tactics. If you can't defeat them, buy them off. They would propose a new treaty. This time, however, the politicians weren't aligned with the generals. In late autumn 1865, following the disastrous campaigns to crush Red Cloud U.S. agents, met with members of several Lakota bands. Red Cloud's Oglala weren't among them, and no Cheyenne participated. Band members who did attend agreed to treaty terms. Eastern newspapers proudly declared, "Peace with the Sioux." Nothing could have been further from truth. In spring 1866, General Pope issued orders that would trigger the final confrontation between the Army and Red Cloud. Soldiers began constructing new forts directly on the Bozeman Trail, including Fort Phil Kearny in the heart of Red Cloud's hunting grounds. The Powder River country became the most dangerous place on earth for a U.S. soldier. Red Cloud watched the new fort rise from the plains, knowing exactly what it meant. The real war had only begun.